Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. Welcome to day 9 of teaser season for patch 0.2.0, Dawn of the Hunt. Worth noting that this is not 9 consecutive days, so if you missed my coverage of day 8, it's 3 days ago. I'll put a link to it down in the description below. That is the single most important piece of teasers for Dawn of the Hunt so far. I've also done a video on Cadence support, which I think has the potential to be the best support gem in the entire game, albeit not something that fits every build. And also a video on the Lich Ascendancy, which is one of the more exciting of the new Ascendancies, with a video on the Amazon in the works. Today though, we're going to cover the new news. This is a change to the way that portals are going to be working in 0.20, which is a change and a substantial improvement over what was originally announced during the live stream on day 8. And additionally, Grinding Games have put out an FAQ. Now, it's important to note that this is not really an FAQ about experienced players' questions. This is an FAQ about the basics of the way that the league structure works in Path of Exile 2. Because I know that my viewer base tends to skew towards the more experienced sections of Path of Exile's community, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but I do want to cover it because I know there'll be people who don't already know this. After that, we'll get into the meat of the portals changes. So let's start with probably the most basic and most important question. When does Dawn of the Hunt launch on all platforms? The answer depends, of course, on your time zone. For me, on the east coast of Australia, it's 6 AM on Saturday. For those of you who are in Europe, it's probably going to be reasonably close to midnight on Friday. For those of you who are in the United States, it's probably going to be Friday afternoon. And as tends to always happen in Path of Exile releases, especially those that take place in summer or close to it in the Southern Hemisphere, we've got some really bad news for those of you who live in Singapore or Perth. Guess what? You're going to have a 3 AM league start. And if I was a better person, I'd be feeling terrible for you right now. Up to you whether you want to set an alarm and get up really early, or whether you want to be more civilized and have a few hours sleep before jumping into the game a little bit late. A lot of these questions revolve around the concept of an economy reset, a fresh economy, a new league, character wipes, and the like. The answer to all of these questions is there are going to be 2 environments you can play the game in. There's Standard. In Standard, all your accumulated wealth, all your existing characters, they all exist there. You can still create new characters there if you want, but as well as you having access to all of your accumulated wealth, so does everyone else. They have access to theirs. This means that there will be players in Standard who have tens of mirrors, thousands or even tens of thousands of divine orbs, and whenever you're bidding for a new item, you're going to have to compete with those people. If you would prefer that environment, then you are more than welcome to keep playing in Standard, to either create a new character or to play an established one. Fair warning though, in Standard, you will find that a number of existing builds will end up not working as well because there's going to be pretty sweeping balance changes. Grinding Games indicate here that they'll be giving free respecs to characters that are affected by these balance changes. The exact scope of that is still to be determined. However, it's not going to include things like the ability to make different choices around gear that you might have made if you knew what the 0.2.0 changes would be. Ultimately, it's up to you if you want to unbrick an existing 0.1.0 character and continue playing it. If that's going to be the way you'll have more fun, then do so. Or alternately, if you prefer a fresh start, then jump over into the fresh start economy instead. Do you need to create a new character and start the game from the beginning? Yes, you do if you want to play in the new Dawn of the Hunt League, the new economy, where you're not competing with established wealth. But if you're not interested in that, then you can play in Standard instead. Will there be a special in-game mechanic that is only available in Dawn of the Hunt leagues? No, there will not be. And this is a divergence from Grinding Games' usual practice. Normally, they make it so that there's something that's only available in the new league. That's not going to be the case here. The game experience will be the same. What happens with my stash tabs if I start in the new league with the fresh economy? Essentially, the answer here is that you'll get a copy of those, but there'll be some complexities when the Dawn of the Hunt League expires and they end up merging. But anything you've paid for in terms of enhancing the amount of stash tabs that you've got, you're going to get the benefits of that both in Standard and also in the Dawn of the Hunt League. Now, is this a paid expansion? No, it's not. It's going to have the same access requirements though as early access in general for Path of Exile 2. So you're going to need to have an early access key, and that's going to give you access to both Standard and to Dawn of the Hunt without needing to make any additional purchase there. Will there be a pre-download? Yes, there'll be a torrent file for this. What information will be revealed and what will be kept back prior to the launch? This week, they're planning to drop full patch notes, as well as information about item filters, what to expect at launch day, and new Twitch drops. They're not intending to reveal all of the new support gems, but They will be data mined as soon as that torrent file is made available, unless Grinding Gear Games decide to make explicit changes to the way that their files work, in which case they might decide to block that. What's going to happen with cosmetic MTX that were purchased for Path of Exile 1? Will they be available in Path of Exile 2? The answer is, it depends. If it makes sense to be in Path of Exile 2, it will eventually be in Path of Exile 2, but it's not necessarily going to be there yet. They're going to be making more of those available in POE 2. Clearly they want to do this because they want to sell a whole bunch of that back catalogue of MTX, but the exact details of which ones are going to be available isn't made clear. What about supporter packs? There'll be no new supporter packs, but they are making Path of Exile 1's Paladin and Penance supporter packs. They're going to make those available to be used in Path of Exile 2 as well. In the Paladin supporter packs, the medium and high tier have the best unique finisher in the game, in my opinion, but of course, people's tastes will vary. Now, let's talk about these changes that are being made to the way that map portals are going to work. Essentially, it all boils down to this. In Path of Exile 1, there's no difference between dying and exiting a map. Either way, when you go into a map again, you're going to consume a portal. In Path of Exile 2, there will be a difference. The number of portals that you get will be set by how hard the content you're running is. The harder the content, the more stingy the game will be with portals. So essentially you can see it as being, while you're running content that you've got training wheels on, at that point the death penalty is not so severe. Once you start saying to the game, you know what, I'm feeling stronger now, you can take these training wheels off. At that point, you start taking the training wheels off and you deal with the consequences of that. Less portals. However, you will only consume a portal when you die. So this means if you get into a sketchy situation in a map but you're able to escape it and run back to your portal, or if you just exit a map in order to dump some loot, or more likely to jump out to trade, in that situation, you're not going to consume a portal when you go back in. This is much better than what was teased in Day 8 and on the live stream, and I'm pretty happy with the way that they've worked this out. Anyways, that's the end of Day 9 teasers. I'm going to leave it there and get back to recording a video on the Amazon and editing a video on currency flipping. While I'm doing that, hopefully your Val orbs have interesting results.